James sat on the edge of his childhood bed, staring at his phone with trembling hands. His left eye was swollen shut. His bank account showed zero. The video had been sent to everyone. His mother, his sisters, his pastor, his colleagues, even his childhood friends. In it, Rebecca stood before the camera, bruises visible on her arms, tears streaming down her face, describing 3 months of terror. The evidence was meticulous. The performance was flawless. And every word was designed to destroy him. His mother wouldn't answer his calls. His sisters had blocked his number. The house he'd purchased was now locked. His name removed from the deed through documents he'd apparently signed while drunk. Everything he'd built, everything he'd controlled, had been stripped away in 72 hours. And the most terrifying part? He'd done this to himself. Before we continue, let me ask you something quietly. Where are you listening from right now? And what time is it in your part of the world? Some of us are hearing this story under the hot afternoon sun. Some in the calm of the night, when thoughts are heavy and hearts are open. Different places, one story, one lesson. If stories like this speak to your heart, please subscribe to the channel. Your like helps this story reach another soul. Your comment tells me you understand the lesson. And when you share, you may be saving someone from the same mistake. Now let us continue. James had a reputation in Lagos. Nothing official, nothing he'd ever acknowledge, but the whispers followed him like shadows. 3 relationships in 5 years, each ending abruptly, each former girlfriend leaving the city shortly after. When friends asked, he'd shrug and say they were too dramatic or didn't understand traditional values. His mother, Victoria, saw the pattern differently. At 62, she'd survived her own violent marriage before finally divorcing James's father. She wanted her son settled, respectable, married to a good woman who could calm whatever darkness she pretended not to see in him. "You're 32 years old," Victoria told him after church one Sunday. "Everyone is asking when you'll find a wife. It reflects on the whole family." 2 weeks later, James met Rebecca at a church fundraiser. She was 28, worked as a primary school teacher, and possessed a quality his previous girlfriends had lacked: submission. When he spoke, she listened with her eyes lowered. When he made decisions, she agreed softly. When other women at the event challenged his opinions about gender roles, Rebecca remained silent, nodding along with his views. "She's perfect," he told his sister Rachel over dinner. Rachel, 26 and studying law in Abuja, set down her fork. "She's too perfect, James. No one is that agreeable. Every time you speak, she acts like you're delivering scripture." "Maybe that's because some women still understand respect," James replied. Rachel studied him carefully. "Or maybe she's performing for you. Be careful, brother." But James dismissed her concern. After years of stubborn, rebellious women, who questioned him, challenged him, refused to accept his authority, Rebecca felt like relief. She never raised her voice, never contradicted him publicly, never demanded explanations when he came home late or avoided her calls. They married 4 months later. Rebecca insisted on a small wedding, just immediate family, she said, because she preferred intimacy over spectacle. James appreciated her modesty. His mother cried with happiness. Rachel attended but said little. On their wedding night, in a hotel suite overlooking Lagos Harbor, James made a joke about Rebecca's cooking, adding that she'd need to learn quickly since he expected dinner ready when he came home. He laughed. It was playful, harmless. Rebecca smiled, but for just a moment, less than a second, her eyes went cold, flat, empty. Then the warmth returned, and she laughed along with him. "Of course, darling. Whatever makes you happy." During their honeymoon in Calabar, James raised his voice over a small issue. Rebecca had booked the wrong restaurant for dinner. She'd apologized, but he wanted to make sure she understood the importance of getting details right, of not embarrassing him in public. His voice echoed through their hotel room. Rebecca didn't flinch, didn't cry. She simply looked at him with that same empty expression, then smiled slowly. "Try that again," she said softly, "and you'll discover who I really am." James laughed nervously. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm the wife you deserve, James. Exactly the wife you deserve." She kissed his cheek and went to shower. James stood alone, feeling something he hadn't experienced in years: unease. Back in Lagos, James reasserted control. He checked Rebecca's phone regularly, questioned her whereabouts, monitored her interactions with male colleagues. Standard protective measures, he told himself. What any responsible husband would do. Rebecca never complained. In fact, she became even more devoted to his mother. Within weeks, Rebecca and Victoria had formed an extraordinary bond. Rebecca visited Victoria 3 times a week, helped with her charity work, cooked her favorite meals. Victoria, who'd lost her only daughter in childbirth years before James was born, blossomed under Rebecca's attention. "Your wife is a blessing," Victoria told James. "She's the daughter I always prayed for." What James didn't know. During those visits, Rebecca carefully planted seeds. "James has been having mood swings," Rebecca confided to Victoria one afternoon, her voice concerned. "He gets so angry over small things. Yesterday he screamed at me for 20 minutes because his shirt wasn't ironed perfectly." Victoria frowned. "That doesn't sound like my son." "I'm sure it's just stress," Rebecca said quickly. "I don't want to worry you. Sometimes he reminds me of stories you've told about your ex-husband." The comparison landed like a knife. Victoria went pale. Rebecca continued her campaign with surgical precision. She befriended James's sisters, particularly his younger sister Sarah. She volunteered at their church. She started therapy sessions with Dr. Adeyemi, a respected counselor, where she described living in constant fear, while carefully recording every session. At home, James's attempts at domination intensified. One evening during an argument about finances, he grabbed Rebecca's wrist, squeezing hard enough to leave marks. Rebecca didn't cry. She didn't pull away. She simply looked at his hand, then at his face and smiled. Later that night, while James slept, she photographed the bruise from multiple angles, wrote detailed notes about the incident with precise timestamps, and saved the documentation in multiple cloud accounts. Weeks passed. Rebecca suggested joint bank accounts. "For transparency and trust," she said. When James hesitated, she had Victoria bring it up casually. "Modern couples share everything, James. It shows commitment." James agreed. Within days, Rebecca had access to everything. His sisters began noticing changes. James seemed irritable, isolated. He'd stopped attending family gatherings. Meanwhile, Rebecca was always warm, always helpful, always present. "I'm worried about your brother," Rebecca told Rachel during a phone call. "He's been so angry lately. I found some disturbing things on his computer, messages to his ex-girlfriends. I think he might be struggling with something dark." Rachel felt torn. She'd warned James, but Rebecca seemed genuinely concerned. And James had been different lately. Distant. Defensive. One night, James and Rebecca argued about money. He discovered she'd moved 20,000 naira without consulting him. His voice rose. His hand rose. He slapped her. The sound cracked through their apartment. Rebecca's head snapped to the side. She touched her reddening cheek slowly, then turned back to him with a smile that made his blood freeze. "Thank you," she whispered. "That's exactly what I needed." What are you talking about?" But Rebecca just walked to the bedroom, closed the door and began making phone calls. James stood in the living room, suddenly feeling like prey that had just wandered into a trap. The second incident came 2 weeks later. Harder. More visible. James hit Rebecca during a fight about her spending, leaving a bruise that bloomed purple across her cheekbone. This was the moment Rebecca had been engineering for 3 months. Within 24 hours she moved out, taking only a small suitcase to Victoria's house, arriving with tears streaming down her face and visible injuries. "I can't anymore, Mother Victoria," she sobbed. "I tried to protect him. I tried to help him. But he's becoming violent. Just like you described your ex-husband." Victoria held Rebecca while she cried, rage and horror building in her chest. Her son had become the monster she'd escaped. Rebecca revealed everything. Showed the bruises, played edited audio recordings where James's voice thundered with threats, while her responses were carefully cut out. She produced her therapy notes, meticulously documenting months of escalating abuse. She showed text messages to his ex-girlfriends. Messages Rebecca herself had sent from James's phone while he slept. The evidence was overwhelming, professional, devastating. Victoria confronted James that same evening. He arrived at her house to find his entire family gathered. His mother, Rachel, Sarah, his uncle Thomas. "How could you?" Victoria's voice shook. "How could you become him?" "Become who?" "Mum, listen. I've seen the evidence. I've heard the recordings. I held that poor girl while she cried." James tried explaining, but every word sounded like deflection. He realized with growing horror that Rebecca had predicted every defense, countered every argument before he could make it. "She's lying," he insisted. "She's manipulating all of you. The way your father said I was lying?" Victoria asked coldly. "The way abusers always claim their victims are liars?" Rebecca had already contacted his ex-girlfriends, offering support and carefully gathering their stories. She'd sent anonymous reports to his workplace with documentation. By the time James understood what was happening, his professional reputation was under investigation, and his family had closed ranks against him. 3 days later, James forced his way into Victoria's house, demanding to speak with Rebecca. He wasn't violent, just desperate, loud, insistent. Rebecca calmly called Rachel and Sarah. They arrived within minutes to find James shouting, Rebecca cowering in the corner, Victoria crying. His sisters physically dragged him out. Sarah slapped him. Rachel called him a monster. As they pushed him into the street, James looked back and saw Rebecca standing in the doorway. For just a moment, her frightened expression vanished, replaced by something triumphant and cold. Then she collapsed into Victoria's arms, sobbing. James checked into a hotel near the airport, the only place he could afford after discovering Rebecca had frozen their joint accounts for her protection. His credit cards were maxed. His savings were gone. Even the car was registered in her name, though he'd paid for it. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from friends, colleagues, church members. Everyone had heard. Rebecca's story had spread through their community like wildfire. Devoted wife, abusive husband, courageous escape. Victoria refused his calls. Sarah blocked him entirely. Rachel answered once, her voice tight with disappointment. "Even if some of what Rebecca says is exaggerated," Rachel told him, "your past is real, James. I've heard things from your ex-girlfriends. They were scared of you. Maybe this is karma." She hung up before he could respond. James spent weeks in a fog of shock and rage. He'd been outmaneuvered so completely that even explaining felt impossible. Every piece of evidence worked against him. Every defense sounded like an abuser's denial. Desperation finally drove him to investigate Rebecca's past. She'd told him she'd never been married, that he was her first serious relationship. But something Thomas, his uncle, said during the confrontation had nagged at him. Some people are experts at revenge. James hired a private investigator with the last of his money. 3 days later, the man called with information that made James's blood run cold. Rebecca had been married before. To a man named David in Abuja 5 years ago. The marriage lasted 6 months before David was arrested for domestic violence against her. He lost his job, his home, his reputation. The charges were eventually dropped due to inconsistencies, but his life was already destroyed. James tracked down David, now living in a small town outside Enugu, working as a security guard. They met at a roadside bar. David was 45 but looked 60, worn down by years of suspicion and isolation. "You're the second person to find me," David said quietly. "Thomas came 3 years ago. Same thing happened to him." Thomas, Rebecca's ex-husband. "She targets men with reputations," David explained. "Men who've hurt women before. She finds them, becomes everything they want, waits for them to show their true nature, then destroys them systematically. She's not just leaving abusive men. She's making them understand what they did by doing worse." "How do you know all this?" "Because after she destroyed me, I investigated too. There were 2 others before me. She's been doing this for almost a decade." James felt sick. "I need to tell my family. They need to know." "They won't believe you," David interrupted. "I tried. Thomas tried. We sound like bitter abusers making excuses. She's too careful. Too perfect." That night, James received photos from Rebecca. Pictures of him with his ex-girlfriends. Each photo marked with dates and notes describing incidents of violence or control. Some were accurate. Some were exaggerated. All were damning. The message attached read, "Your mother now has copies. So does everyone at your church. Feel powerless yet? That's how every woman you hurt felt. Now you understand." James stared at his phone in his dark hotel room and finally understood. This wasn't random. This was justice, cruel, excessive, precise justice for crimes he'd actually committed. Victoria organized a family meeting without James. Rebecca sat in the center of the living room, surrounded by the Adebayo family, and made her final performance. "I'm pregnant," she whispered, tears flowing. "I found out yesterday. I don't know what to do." Victoria embraced her. Sarah and Rachel cried with her. The family rallied completely around Rebecca, now carrying James's child. She was family. He was the monster they'd exiled. 2 days later, James waited outside Victoria's house until Rebecca emerged alone, heading to her car. He stepped into her path. Not threatening, just broken. "Why?" he asked simply. Rebecca's performance dropped instantly. Her tears vanished. Her expression went cold and clinical. "You want to know why, James? Every woman you hurt felt exactly like you do right now. Helpless. Unbelieved. Destroyed. Isolated from everyone who should protect them." She stepped closer. "I didn't invent anything. I just used your own truth against you. Every recording is real, I just edited out context. Every bruise is real, you gave them to me. Every ex-girlfriend's testimony is accurate. I simply collected what you scattered. You're insane. I'm thorough. And for the record, I'm not pregnant. But your family will never believe you if you tell them. That's what it feels like, James. Being called a liar when you're telling the truth. This isn't justice." "No," Rebecca agreed. "Justice would require the law, courts, evidence that matters. This is something older. This is pain teaching what words never could. You finally understand what you did to those women. Congratulations. You learned." She drove away, leaving James standing on the street. 3 months later, Victoria discovered inconsistencies in Rebecca's story. Small details that didn't align. A therapy recording where Rebecca's accent slipped, revealing calculations rather than fear. By then, Rebecca had received a substantial financial settlement from the joint accounts and properties, claiming she needed security for the baby. When Victoria tried to reconnect with James to apologize, she discovered Rebecca had already moved to Accra, Ghana. The pregnancy had been lost, Rebecca claimed in a brief text. She wouldn't be returning. Victoria begged James to come home. He refused. "You believed her over me," he said quietly. "Even after everything, you believed I was capable of being him. Maybe I was. Maybe I deserved this. But I can't forget that my own mother saw me as a monster." Victoria wept. "I was wrong. You were right, Mom. About who I was. Rebecca just showed me in a way that destroyed us both." James rebuilt his life slowly in pieces. He remained in Lagos but in a different neighborhood. Rachel maintained minimal contact. Phone calls on holidays, awkward lunches twice a year. Sarah never forgave him. Victoria tried desperately to repair their relationship, but some fractures run too deep. A year after everything collapsed, James began volunteering at a domestic violence center, specifically in their men's support group, working with male victims of abuse. The irony wasn't lost on him. Neither was the pain on the faces of men who'd been manipulated, hurt, destroyed by intimate partners. He understood both sides now. The terror of powerlessness, the shame of not being believed, the permanent damage that violence, physical or psychological, inflicts on everyone it touches. His past victims would never forgive him. He didn't expect them to. His family would never fully trust him again. He'd earned that distance. Rebecca's manipulation had been cruel, calculated, and excessive, but it had been built on his real crimes. On his 34th birthday, James sat alone in his small apartment and wrote letters to his 3 ex-girlfriends. He didn't send them. What could he say? Sorry didn't heal bruises. Apologies didn't erase fear. Understanding came too late to matter. He'd learned the lesson Rebecca taught him. Violence creates violence, pain echoes through generations, and some wounds never heal, for anyone. He was the perfect student. And this was his permanent education.